speaker today is a woman of accomplishment. We know that she sharpened her business acumen with such great companies as KPMG, and then after that she went into the public sector. She was the Deputy Chief of Staff for both our Governor Sonny Perdue and for Vice President Dan Quayle. She was the President and CEO of the North Fulton Chamber of Commerce, and then she became the Chairman of the Board of the Fulton County Board of Commissioners. With that position, which is of course our largest county, she not only provided a balanced budget without raising taxes, but she was credited with passing one of the strictest ethics reform bills in local government. And then in 2006, she had a historic accomplishment, an historic achievement, when she was chosen as Georgia's first Republican Secretary of State. Would you please join me in welcoming a woman of accomplishment, our own Secretary of State, Karen Handel.
Thank you very much. Thank you very, very much. Gosh, this is great to be here because I look around the room and I'm just around so many good and great friends. And I think I want to start because a lot of you, I haven't really had a chance to stand up in a formal way in front of you to say thank you for what is truly one of the most tremendous honors that I have had the privilege of doing, and that is to serve as your Secretary of State. And it is not lost on me that I get to do what I do because people like you were willing to take a chance on a young gal who started her career here in Georgia at KPMG, and so I am really incredibly grateful for this opportunity. It has been a little bit over a year since I took office, and what I have found, frankly, has been interesting. I think, candidly, a lot of us would look on my predecessor and before them as folks who were fairly reform-minded. But I got to tell you, I've really found an agency really mired in stagnation, and it has been a little perplexing because I did not expect to find it. I thought that there would be policy differences, but I did not expect to find the management issues that I found from top to bottom there. Sort of this incredible commitment to doing things the way they've always been done. And so we kind of took a step back to look at a few things and found that, you know, in over 60 years, if you think about it, we've only had 5 Secretaries of State prior to me. And before that, and 2 of them were deputy secretaries that ascended up. And so with that, you then start to, you know, get a different kind of culture. And even if you don't think about political party changes, the agency really didn't even have the benefit of people changes in the leadership roles and even down the ranks. I mean, if I go across the agency, oh man, I would bet our average tenure is well over 15 years. And, you know, institutional knowledge, y'all know this as business people, is great, but it can also be an enemy if you don't have leadership asking people to really look forward and think forward, and that's kind of what we found. And so trying really hard to refocus the agency on some of the fundamentals of process and accountability and customer service and efficiency and how do we employ technology. And with the diverse divisions of the Secretary of State's office, that's sometimes difficult because what happens in elections, no one in elections really would interact with anyone in corporations. Corporations with securities, with professional licensing. But then if you think about some of the basic things that, let's say, licensing, securities, and corporations do, what do? Process paperwork. Well, guess what? I have 3 different technology platforms in those divisions. That makes no sense whatsoever. So we have gross inefficiencies there, and we'll be working on that. P cards, the infamous P cards, were on my radar screen before they hit the press, and I found that we had something like 50 people with P cards. And again, coming from the corporate world, I mean, can you imagine Neil Purcell if 50 of us had purchasing cars? That's a vision that I'm afraid of. And so we went through and we just yanked them all back, and we only division directors have P cards. And in the first month of the new policy last year, 37% reduction in purchases. We've now had it, in a year, 47%. And these were real bottom line savings, particularly in the area of office products and random purchases like refrigerators. I mean, think about that, a refrigerator, So we fixed all of that. Ethics, no ethics policy whatsoever in the agency, so we pulled from my days with Eric Tenenblatt in the governor's office and modeled an ethics policy there so that we don't have companies like Diebold, now Premier, that want to do gazillion millions of dollars worth of business with our agency, whining and dining our folks. We have a 1-year cooling off period. Some of you might not know this, but the former elections director for the state of Georgia, 1 month was your elections director, the next month the senior executive with Diebold, and so we won't have that anymore. And all of these rules, by the by, apply to me personally as well, because I don't think you can ask your team to adhere to one set of rules and have a different set for yourself. Nepotism policy, this was really stunning for me. It's one thing if you have a small business and it's a family business. If I drew a family tree of the Secretary of State's office, 30% of our team is related, y'all. Now, I mean, seriously, I love some of you know my husband. Fabulous man. Love him with every fiber of my being. Don't want to work with him. Who are these people who want to go to work with their husband and wife every day? I mean, but in all seriousness, you think about the drama that creates in the workplace. We had 2 very serious disciplinary actions involving 2 employees, 2 women. The one woman's husband worked there. The other woman's mama worked there. Well, both of the women got fired. So in the course of going through the termination process, we had to go deal with the husband and the mama. Now, I viewed it a little bit like a twofer because then they both quit, so that was okay. So it was a little bit of a benefit, but I mean, but it is a really serious thing that as you're dealing with it, it means that your personnel process takes double, triple the time to get through because you've got to manage all of these, side things going on. We now have a 4-year strategic plan for the agency. Every single employee, whether they work on the front line of the customer service department, in Macon and PLB, whether they are in the warehouse, whether they are the Deputy Secretary of State, has an annual action plan to which his or her performance is tied. Now, I was asked a question during the budget hearings about whether or not I preferred the 2% pay raise proposal or the 2.5% pay raise proposal for state employees, and it was all going to be a straight COLA. And I thought that the members of both the House and the Senate Budget Committee were going to fall off the dais because I said neither. And here's why. It should be the rarest of times that we are doing across-the-board COLAs to employees. They should be merit and performance-based. And last year's pay raise that went into effect January 1st, this will blow your minds. I had to give that to employees that started on December 15th. They'd been there for 2 weeks. I didn't even know if they were going to stay, but they got a 3% pay raise. And I fundamentally object to that. And we don't have the ability in government to be able to, call out the dead weight. Y'all know this. When you're giving out your pay raises, you force rank your employees so your best performing individuals are getting the most and your least performing get nothing. I don't know why I've got a person who gets, maybe they just barely meet the MET requirements on a performance review. You're not quite ready to fire them, but I darn sure don't want to give them a pay raise. But I've had no options on that. So at a minimum now, we have these action plans every year. And if the folks don't meet, it's one thing if it's not funded in the budget, but if they don't meet what's on the paper for their action plan, if there isn't a really good reason, they're going to get an unmet, period. In the area of corporations, that's probably been the biggest success story, I think, in the agency. This was a division that many of you deal with that was probably the most poorly respected, worst performing unit, and not a week goes by now that I don't get an email, a phone call, or a letter about how responsive this group is from a customer service standpoint. And it's all the same people, with the exception of maybe two. The difference is that we set forth with them what the expectations are and put in place a new division leader, and we held people accountable to what we wanted them to achieve. And they have risen to the occasion. There's still work to do there, but we're getting there. And the agency is one that just, nobody believed in process in this agency. And I really like, Eric knows this, I love process and procedures and things, don't I? Really do love that. Because it's fundamental, it's basic for people to know how to do their jobs. You don't want to let it rule the day, but you got to have fundamentals in place. Well, one of the things that we discovered in putting in place process in the corporations group was that there were some 300,000 companies marked active delinquent in Georgia's corporate database. We're like, what does that mean? Well, it meant that these entities hadn't paid their annual corporate renewal fee for some of them as far back as 7 years ago. That meant they weren't even doing business legally in the state of Georgia. Never mind that when we mailed them, we collected $3.2 million in revenue owed to the state. More importantly, we're cleaning up the database because we are the keepers. I mean, think about in a time when we have some economic uncertainty. I don't have any ability to go into that database and look at how many new companies were formed 3 years ago compared to the next year and this year. What's the success fail rate of those companies? I can't pull that data because it's a corrupt database. Now, it'll be current after this year and we'll have data going forward, but that's why really having procedures in place is important. How did that happen? Siloism. One person's job was to do that particular process. Somewhere along the line, that individual left. Nobody else knew what that person did. Why? Because there was no manual of what the function, what the office, that particular division did. So when people left, there was not any kind of instruction manual. Same thing for elections. Little accountability in the office and with the counties. Many of our counties just do whatever they want when it comes to elections, and we're not going to have it. We had one county that will be before the State Elections Board in 2 months. The state law, and oh, by the way, a U.S. Department of Justice consent order says that absentee ballots will be in the mail 45 days prior to an election. For February 5th, 45 days was December 21st. I had a county not mail out their absentee ballots on December 21st. They mailed them out on January 5th, I believe it was. Why? Oh, you would think it would be just a really great reason, right? She went on vacation. And was so blasé about it, sent me a memo to tell me so. That county will be fined. That individual, we don't have the authority to remove that individual, but the county will be fined and the person will have to go through some training. We worked with the county closely. We instructed them to contact every single one of, I think it was like 32 voters. But it could have been a disaster. It could have been 3,200 voters that had to be tracked down. So this is why accountability is important. I'll take this opportunity to make what I think is a really important announcement among friends. No, nothing like that, whoever's over there laughing. We will soon, in our licensing area, begin utilizing what's called the SAVE program, the Systematic Alien Verification for Entitlement Program, to verify the legal status of every individual applying for a professional license in the state of Georgia. We should, and I think that's only fair and only reasonable until the feds get their acts together and really deal with the issue. Last thing, and then I hope I have some time for Q&A, the legislative session. Contrary to what people have read in the press and all of that, there were some successes in the session, at least for this gal. And thanks to Jim Cole and Harry Geisinger for all of their help. We were able to achieve a complete rewrite of the state securities law, which hadn't been done in probably 25 years. I don't even think NASDAQ was around the last time the Georgia securities law was looked at. We revamped the corporation's dissolution process. If you can believe this, if you wanted to voluntarily dissolve a company, it costs you money. So that's now free, and we've put in some added protection for company names so that if you have a family name of your business, someone can't come in and steal it from you and things of that nature. Absentee ballot protection fraud legislation passed. Our photo ID education funds were put back in the budget, frankly, thanks in large part to some very heavy lifting from the two of you in the House. So thank you very, very much for all of that. We did have one significant loss, and that was the wrestling bill. Jim Cole did yeoman's effort on that. Don't know really what transpired there, but we will probably be back with that. It's a common sense piece of legislation to have good health and welfare there. Overall, though, and those of you who know me know that I am a very straightforward person, and I think it would be disingenuous for me to stand up here and not say what needs to be said. Overall, I do not think that the grade for the legislative session is going to be a good one. And that's not any reflection on the legislators. That is a reflection on every single elected official, myself included. And I put myself in the mix, standing shoulder to shoulder, because I think that we are a team. Whether some people believe that or don't believe that, we are a team. I travel this state every single week, from Dalton to Savannah, Atlanta to Augusta, Macon to Columbus. And I can tell you, the people of this state get it. They get it. They know that we have serious problems that deserve serious, practical, implementable solutions. They're not stupid. What they are, however, is frustrated, extremely frustrated at the lack of real progress and the increasing rhetoric and rancor. Now, all of us, and I emphasize all of us again because I really genuinely believe that we are a team. And we've got to come together. And I'm not speaking out of school. I have said that the grade would not be good to both the Speaker and Lieutenant Governor. But we've got to come together and face this. As elected officials, as all reasonable people, we are going to agree and disagree. But we are professionals, and we should have the ability to do it reasonably and professionally in a straightforward, forthright manner, not with gotchas and last-minute surprises designed for, political hay. We've got to stop letting the lure of higher public office get in the way of doing what is right and what is in the best interest of this state. Now, for all of us who care about transportation, taxes, trauma care, education, we're frustrated. Many of us are angry, and I think we need to channel all of that into a productive place to demand that we get some real solutions. And I firmly believe that as a statewide elected official, with the two legislators that we have with us here today, there are those of us who are ready to do that. We've got to move forward on transportation. The notion that transportation is a Metro Atlanta problem is ridiculous. When's the last time anybody's tried to drive through Macon at 4 o'clock? Yeah. If we put the plan out there, I genuinely believe that we can sell it. That's all I have to say about that. Questions? Not on one? Yes. I was asked that, what was the most interesting thing? And I said two things. We visited two companies. One company that is putting a manufacturing facility in Peachtree City, and a second one, Shins Electronics. And I was blown away by sort of the sophistication of the corporations that we visited. Now, mind you, I'm sure we went to some of the best, but nonetheless, that is there. I also was really struck by from Chinese business execs the level of high interest that they have in how Americans do business, from how we go to market with product to how we treat manufacturing workers, etc. That was really interesting, and the level of growing wealth. I would tell you, I would bet that all of us share angst around the human rights issues, Tibet, and all of those issues right now in China. With that said, there's no doubt in my mind China is going to be an economic powerhouse in the global economy. And for the United States, we have to decide, are we going to put our heads in the sand, or are we going to stand up and figure out a way to be competitive and then ensure that we leverage any economic progress that occurs in China to make sure that financial freedoms, as has happened in other places around the world, really translates into broader personal freedoms.
Are you anticipating any voter ID challenges again, or fix all of them on the Supreme Court?
The question about photo ID. The Indiana case is still pending in the U.S. Supreme Court. I think Indiana has a pretty good chance of being upheld. If it is upheld, then I think the appeals here in Georgia go away. If it's not upheld, I think that the appeal will continue, and we could even end up before the U.S. Supreme Court. But I believe that Georgia would be on more solid ground than Indiana, because not one but two of the justices singled out Georgia's photo ID law and some of the differences with Indiana in the oral arguments for Indiana. The presidential primary on February 5th went extremely well. Extremely well. We had 2.1 million voters. Of 2.1 million voters, 416 individuals came to a precinct without the proper form of photo ID. About half of them did come back in the 48 hours, no, about a third, in the 48 hours with the right ID. We have already contacted every single one of the individuals who did not come back. And in some cases, if we could find a phone number, we called them. As I said, we were able to get the funding back in for our photo ID education program. That will carry us through July and November, so that I can meet not only my commitment to the people, but for me, as in a personal way, my commitment to Judge Murphy, because I don't really know what happens if you don't meet your commitment to a federal judge, and that was making me a little nervous. So thank you. And so we'll be able to do everything that we need to do coming into November. So I don't expect problems. Yes, it'll be a bigger turnout come November, but it's the same mechanics. Yes?
Electronic voting doesn't seem to be an issue in Georgia, but it is everywhere else. Why do you think that is?
Politics. Remember that the two individuals, Secretary Bruner from Ohio, what's that woman in California? What's the Californian's name? What is her name? Whatever her name is. Anyway, and the woman in California, they both won their elections on anti-electronic voting machine platforms. And then you add to that, the woman in California, she is very close friends with Dianne Feinstein. And so together with Congressman Holt from New Jersey, they're really pushing this. I mean, there are those who would suggest that we go back to just straight paper and pencil. Now, I mean, you want to talk about fraudulent, corrupt elections, let's go back to paper and pencil. But with all that said, there are going to be new federal standards. I would guess probably by in time for us to implement something in 2012. For me, the difficult challenge is going to be the funding. We're not going to be able to count that from a federal level we're going to get all $150 million, maybe closer to $200 million to replace a voting system. And that's the kind of numbers we're talking. So we're already looking at what would be the funding options, because obviously in the budget, with budget law, we can't bank money. It's not like in the real world, when we know we need a new car, we start planning for it. Or if we know we want to buy a new house, we start saving for it. You don't really have that opportunity or that path to avail yourself in the state budget law. But what we can look at are things like sale leaseback and some of those things, which might make sense when you're talking about a technology platform that expensive, so that you have the ability to upgrade your system in progress. But that means that comes with a purchasing component, that you're making a long-term commitment to a particular vendor, and you've got to have great trust in that. What else? Yeah.
Everything's electronic voting now, so why do we still have to wait till 10 or 11 o'clock for the results?
Because we get the results from the counties. A couple of states have looked at, and it takes time for them to go through the process, because the votes are done at the precinct, then they come into the county, they're verified again, and then they come into the state, and we verify them. And it's my opinion that we want that sort of three-step check. A couple of states are looking at centralized vote centers, including Ohio. I think that is a disaster, because think about it. If all the votes come into one place before they're even counted the first time, if you have an issue, you've got to sift through all, 4 or 5 million votes in the case of Georgia. Think about that. Versus if the way we do it, you can track back where your issues are. And I think that makes a lot more sense. And remember, it used to be 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. Yes.
A separate question, but first, my husband's name is completing of the book. My question is related to nonprofits. And as you know, Grassley and the Conference and GAO have looked at nonprofits and found that many were not paying the payroll taxes that they should have, and IRS never have a way to address it. And I'm just wondering if there's anything potential in the future to strengthen the way that we regulate the proliferation of nonprofits.
That's actually a good thought. It's something that we sort of looked a little bit into for this session, and there's a lot of different rules, though, with federal rules and IRS rules around nonprofits that at the state level you can't sort of usurp from an oversight standpoint. But I do think it's a problem. One thing that we are doing is trying to be a little more appropriately assertive around the oversight component of it. And I mean, we've got a couple of pretty big investigations right now involving folks who haven't done proper filings. Great. Thank y'all so much.